It takes 20 years to build a reputation and just a few minutes of cyber incident to ruin it. And that certainly was the case of Medibank having the top level login details for an admin to their servers and to all their infrastructure stolen and sold on the dark web. Having a great reputation. I'm part of Medibank myself through the AHM subsidiary. So I was very quite disappointed, I guess, by the fact that so much information was able to be just brought out and put out to the public by people holding them to ransom. So it certainly does erode our faith in not just cybersecurity and not just our faith in online portals or anything like that. It can actually erode our faith in the institutions and businesses that have been building their reputations for a very, very long time. What we're going to cover today is a little bit about your security obligations as a small business. Yes, you do have some. We're going to look at how you can do 4 things that are going to help you to secure yourself and protect yourself against those kind of hacks, and also like very good cybersecurity hygiene just for your own personal use as well, through your mobile devices, through your website, through your software that's running on your computer, and through your passwords as well. Right now, it's Cyber Week. It's coming to the very, very end of it today. It's just a week where we spend a lot of time nationally just looking at helping to get small businesses and people in general in a position where they're not so easily hacked, where they're not so easily taken for a ride, and people's details aren't stolen. And you see these issues coming up. There's so many have been. Whilst there's been a lot of big news around a couple of big companies, I guess what gets missed is there are many, many small businesses and individuals who don't have millions of dollars at risk. They might have a couple of $100,000 at risk by having really poor cyber hygiene practices. It's brought to you by Business Station and the Digital Solutions Program. You can find out more about that, even though you're probably already part of it, because by being in this webinar at digitalsolutions.businessstation.com.au. Now, just checking to see how many of us, so a few of us in today, so thank you for joining us. I'm guessing from some of the names, I'm looking at people that I know from WA, a couple from Queensland, one here from the Northern Territory as well, so thank you for joining us. And it's different times during the day for everyone, different lunchtime for many on the West Coast, maybe not so much. If you do want to watch this again later, if you need to pop out at some point, this will be published on YouTube early next week at the Business Station YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/@businessstation. Nice and easy to find, or just search Business Station on the YouTube search bar. A little bit about me. I do a lot of work with Meta as a lead trainer with them. And I know that the one question I get asked more about with Facebook than anything else is I've been locked out of my account, or I've been hacked out of my account, or I've been have my access to my business page stolen. I get that. If I get one, I get 10, 12, 13 of those a week. In so many cases, there's nothing we can do because it's not actually Facebook's fault that your password and username was stolen. It was because it was so easy to, in most cases, so easy to steal and so easy to guess. My own business, Clickstarter, is going through a pivot right now. I was a digital agency, now moving back into a different kind of digital agency. So, lips are sealed until I've got that completed. Startup Territory is a business of mine doing an early stage pre-accelerator program for new businesses, just getting out of the gate with their ideas. I work as a entrepreneurship facilitator with Workforce Australia's self-employment services in Darwin, and also, of course, with the Digital Solutions Program and the Google Digital Springboard Program too. But one of the other things I'm really being quite heavy upon is making sure I keep my cybersecurity accreditations up to date, and I'm always making sure I'm checking on what's going on at the Australian Cybersecurity Centre. And the best way to do that for a lot of small businesses is through the Stay Smart online portal or through cyber.gov.au. 2 very good places to get some up-to-date information about what's really happening in cybersecurity, particularly for business. So I'm going to start off with a few of what your obligations are when it comes to cybersecurity, because there are legal repercussions to everything these days, and cybersecurity is certainly one of those things where you can have some very nasty things happen. The unavoidable truth is, though, that if there is a vulnerability, it will be exploited. everything, and I mean everything, from this phone to this, this step counter that I'm wearing from Garmin on my wrist. Every one of these things is vulnerable in some way to some kind of electronic attack. So it's not like you think that, okay, everything's gonna be safe. I've got my connected fridge, I've got my internet of things, my smart lives, my smart lights, my smart PowerPoints. I've got all that set up. Every single one of those things is hackable in some way, which is a bit terrifying, isn't it? But the reality is, just by doing a few things like we're going to show you today, that risk profile drops dramatically. And in some cases, I would say up to 95% of your risk is abated by applying some principles we're going to learn today. So there's four main areas of law that apply to cybersecurity. And that's the Privacy Act of 1988. These are Commonwealth Acts. The Crimes Act of 1914. The Security of Critical Infrastructure Act of 2018. And the Telecommunications Interception and Access Act of 1979. Every one of these are federal government acts, and they're all there for very different reasons. How do they relate? When you look at the Crimes Act, the Privacy Act, the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act, and Telecommunications, how do they all work together? Well, each one of them has a part to play depending on whether it's infrastructure that's attacked, whether it's using carrier services like telecommunications and internet service providers. Then there's the actual criminal aspect of what's going, which is covered by the Crimes Act. And the Privacy Act covers the personal information and how it's treated, stored, and whether there is any sort of liability to someone who loses people's personally identifiable information, especially in the case of like Medibank. That's been a massive one. The amount of information that's going out there is just horrific. I'm not worried. I'm quite privileged. The only thing I do with my health insurance is get my glasses each year and get my teeth done. Get my teeth cleaned and updated, any sort of minor dental work that I need, like fillings or something. I'm not in a position where I may be a person who's in a very vulnerable position, who's had to get a termination of pregnancy, and that sort of stuff is showing up on their medical records through Medibank. So that's where we really have to go, okay, oh yeah, I've got nothing to hide, but there are people who do. And that's quite often the attitude that a lot of business owners have, is like, well, I'm not really holding that much information on them. And then you go in there and see, actually, there's lots of notes that are being taken about a client, and some of those may contain some personal details. Now, when it comes to critical infrastructure, that's one of the ones that most people get a little bit like, well, I'm just a small business, I don't have critical infrastructure. But you kind of do. Sorry for my spelling on some of those words. Holy crap. If you're working in transport and logistics, even if you're just a courier, for instance, you are part of the critical transport and logistics infrastructure. When it comes to food and grocery, if you're selling corner store, which is selling food and grocery, or something to do with the distribution of food and groceries, you are part of critical infrastructure. If you're working in higher education, tertiary education, then you are in a critical infrastructure point. Same with any kind of medical health records, even from a naturopath to a chiropractor, financial services like bookkeepers and accountants and financial advisors, and we've got lots of those on our program. Or it comes down to anyone who's in a business that stores data. Now, the kind of data I'm talking about is information like the names, addresses, emails, phone numbers, client records, any of that kind of data being stored is considered to be part of critical infrastructure. Now, I don't think you're necessarily going to be caught out with these sort of things on a very big basis, based on the fact that most of us don't have a lot of clients. We've got some clients, we don't have a lot of them. We're not serving hundreds or thousands of people every single year. So it may not seem that big. But in the case of every one of those aspects, whether you work in one of those fields or your business is operating in one of those fields, if you do get a hacking, you are required by law to notify the Australian Cybersecurity Centre within 72 hours. Now, just the experience, I know that one of my friends who has a business to do with logistics and transport, he did get in touch with the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, and he said, yeah, I've just been hacked. People got into my email, and the turnaround from the ACSC wasn't very urgent. Like, they was just going, look, how many clients have you got? How many records do you think were seen? Okay, you're using Microsoft Outlook. Okay, no worries. Have you changed your password? You've got everything out. When do you think it happened? Oh, it was about 15 minutes ago. Okay, so there's a very good chance that those hackers haven't got any information that's particularly worthwhile just yet. They would have hit a two-factor authentication point or something like that that's stopping them from getting fully into your account. But the idea is that it's like coming in through customs after going to Bali, and I know last time I came in through the airport from Bali, I brought back some spices that were in a sealed container that I got from the Bintang supermarket in Seminyak, and I was like, okay, well, sure, that couldn't hurt. I thought I'd better be safer than sorry, so I went and I did declare them, and I'm glad I did because the experience was very good with that. The particular customs officer said, look, you're going to be fine with this. It's just like basically chai tea spices. But you've done the right thing by, when you're not sure, just letting us know anyway. So I was pretty happy to get through that. And the same thing is here. Even if nothing comes of it and nothing's huge about it, it's really good to let them know, because it's another data point that helps them to be able to predict what some of the patterns with cybersecurity and data breaches may be at various places across Australia and all sorts of sizes of business. I've got a whole lot of birds chirping in the background. Hopefully you can't hear those through my super Microsoft Sound Calmer thing, so hopefully it's okay. Now, how can you get in trouble as a small business? What are the sort of things that could pop up for you? Well, if you look at how you can get in trouble, we're trying to look at things like the ASIC, so Australian Securities Investments Commission, can take legal action against a business that fails to take, now this is an important word, reasonable steps to protect personal and financial information from being stolen. So this means that you've got to make sure you have some kind of protection in place, enough, hurdles for hackers to jump over that it's pretty hard for them to get in. Having admin and admin as your username and your password is probably not reasonable steps. Having hard to guess passwords, having two-factor authentication, so as getting a little message on your mobile before you can log in, making sure there's a second place you have to go before anyone can log in, that's something that's on you, like your phone. It could be an authenticator app, or the Google Authenticator or the Microsoft Authenticator. Any of those things would be seen as reasonable steps. But if you don't have those reasonable steps and you don't have good password hygiene, and what I mean by password hygiene is something I'll show you very soon, but Jesus123 is your password or something like that. That's the stuff that's really going to get you in trouble when you just don't go. I've got a message here saying that you use LastPass. Is that adequate? Now, it depends on what you do with LastPass. I've got LastPass. I've got a 64 character phrase that I use to log into LastPass each day. Then that opens up all my other passwords, which are also 64 characters each, where in the cases where they allow me to have that many. Is that paranoid? Absolutely. I was hacked back in 2008, and I promised I'd never would be again. LastPass is great. KeePass is also good. 1Password, also a very good system too. You just got to make sure that the 1Password you have to get into your account is incredibly hard to guess, but easy for you to remember. So if we like to use passphrases. So, it could be lines out of a song, like the lyrics, the first 3 lines of a song, or the first 2 lines of a song of your favorite song, or another favorite song that you pick out as something like that. Poetry. I picked out a particular piece of poetry that I can very easily remember from something I studied when I was in year 11. So that's the kind of password I've used, and it's got about 64 characters in it. No one's really going to guess that in a hurry. So yes, as long as that 1Password to get into your LastPass is going to be a good one, and you're not just recycling passwords on all the other sites, using the same username and password all the time, then yeah, LastPass is going to be pretty good. You're going to be doing pretty well with LastPass. So that's ASIC. The second one is with the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, the ACCC. They can take legal action against businesses that share personal and health-related information with any sort of third party without consent. Now, I can tell you now, there's not many businesses who are going to deliberately do that. But there are plenty of businesses who don't realize they've already done that. So they may not know they're hacked. They may have been hacked and did nothing about it. This is where we're saying, okay, we need to make sure that we take all the steps we possibly can, because no one wants these guys knocking on your door, because then they do, it's the federal government. These are federal crimes that are being committed. So that's where you have to go, well, I have to protect myself as a small business. The Office of the Australian Information Commissioner can take legal action against a business for not preventing unauthorized third parties from accessing its customers' personal information in a cyber attack. Now, if someone in a very sophisticated attack does get in, so someone who's gone through a lot of social engineering and a lot of effort and time to get those login details like they did with Medibank, then there's nothing really you could have done about that. That was a cluster of epic stuff ups that happened from Medibank's point of view. It's someone internally hadn't been very secure with their particular password, and that then allowed them to get in as basically God access to all the systems that Medibank have. So they can take legal action against you, but they have a burden of proof to prove that you really did nothing to protect your customers' personal information when that cyber attack came. So yeah, just bear in that one. It sounds a lot scarier than it is, and it's mostly designed for big businesses who hold a lot of data on their clients. You think of like Telstra, for instance, the amount of data, call data, SMS data, data usage data, the amount of times they've called, the conversations they've had with the customer service rep, all those things become part of that customer's personal information. You would want to think that Telstra has done a good job of protecting it, and they certainly have done a very good job. Optus, yeah, and maybe not so good a job. Vodafone seem to be doing fine just now, but I cross my fingers and hopefully they'll all still do the same. But you think about it, right? The big fish they're after are really big business. Not because that's where the big money is, but it's where the big impact is. Yeah, sure, these are companies that can not necessarily afford to pay a $70 million fine for such great breaches at $17,000 per breach. It's more so that the impact they can have as a big business, because of the number of clients they have and the amount of information they gather, is very, very high. A small business usually, and I say usually, it's not always the case, but usually don't collect that much information from their clients and customers. There's no real need for them to collect that much information. So that's why we usually see in all those cases with the ACCC, the Office of the Information Commissioner, the ASIC, the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, mostly going after big business, because not just because they're the big fish to catch, but they're also the big problems that need to be solved. A small business, not so big a problem. Even though it might impact you and your clients, you don't have 9 million clients like Medibank does. So one of the first ways we're going to look at is how to protect yourself along the way of both you and your customers' data is the way you use your mobile devices. And you might think, oh, what can I possibly go wrong on my mobile? Like, I've got it on me at all times. And that's exactly the problem with it. We have it on us at all times, but I'm constantly convincing my mum, because I'm here at my mum's place at the moment, and I am constantly talking to her about the fact that she doesn't want to put a PIN number on her phone when it opens. And she's like, well, who's going to really get much from me? And I'm like, well, the problem is, though, you've got lots of emails of lots of different people who you communicate with, access to your Facebook account. So if someone goes in there and pretends to be you and starts asking one of your friends for money, and those friends don't know any better that it's not you, that's where it can impact people. And then you think, oh, okay, that then is actually a big problem. So when it comes to locking your phone, so that make it more than a swipe up. As a swipe up, it's a really, really just a very vulnerable way to leave your phone. So we say that a PIN number, so a 4 to 6 character PIN number, is good. That's a very good way to start. I can tell you now that you're probably, when you use a PIN, you're going to use the same PIN number you use for your bank account, or the same PIN number you use to get in your building. It's a PIN number you're going to be reusing from somewhere else, right? So what we say is usually better is a passphrase. So it's a set of letters or numbers, or it could just be a whole lot of words that you've strung together that you have to type in those words in order to log in with that particular password. That's why we moved from password now to passphrase. We want to make sure that we're not just using a word that's really easy to use, because it might be a part of what we've got like what we've got as far as our what am I saying? Our usual things that we use, we move into something that we normally wouldn't use. Something that's too much to be putting into a security code on a door, too much to be putting into a bank ATM. It's going to be something which is far harder for people to guess. And we've got, very much proof, and tests have been run that even with today's very high, fast computer technology, guessing a small password like, I don't know, Book123, because that might be your granddaughter's name, can be undone pretty quickly compared to the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog 1756 hash. Now, that's going to be taking literally 32 years of the fastest computer in the world to try and crack that password, simply because it's got so many characters in it. Now, that particular one would probably not be a good example because it's a very commonly known one that used as a typing exercise, because it uses every single key, every single letter key on a keyboard. The best is use biometrics. And the reason is because it's your fingerprint, it's your face. That's going to make it a lot harder. Now, I've had some criticism come up and say, well, what if you're passed out and someone just picks up your finger and puts it on the phone and they're able to get in? Well, number one, they have to use the right finger. If they don't use the right finger in 3 times, then, well, they're going to lock out the phone. They're not going to be able to get into it. So what you do is you don't use your thumbprint, you don't use your index fingerprint, you use one of the 6 other fingers. Right, so you've got 10 fingers to work with. Everyone uses these ones when it comes to doing their thumbprint and their fingerprint when it comes to logging into their phones. So if you've got a phone that does that, mine does. It's got one that goes through the screen. I use a particular finger for mine. It's not my index finger, and it's not my thumb to get me in, because I know that is potentially a problem. Now, I'm not the sort of person to get drunk and pass out around my friends. I don't even drink, but I don't want to be in a position where I'm incapacitated and someone wants to break into my phone so they can steal stuff. They don't need that for emergency stuff, because there's emergency features on all phones these days. They'll allow you to call through to ambulance. So it's never an emergency thing. It's just that I don't want to, if I'm passed out of sleep or any other way of incapacitated, I don't want someone to be able to use my fingerprint based on the 2 that they're probably going to use. It's going to take them a while to get the finger that I actually use. The other thing is too, your face. So yes, there's some of the earlier face recognition problems, particularly on Samsung phones, were very weak. They've certainly improved out of sight now. So the Apple image recognition, the facial recognition, the Samsung facial recognition, and some of the other Android phones as well is now excellent too. Now, can someone wake up a phone if you're sitting there asleep? Yeah, they can. That's actually a very real thing that can happen. Someone can unlock your phone based upon that. Can they do it based upon like printing a photo of you and using the printout of your face to open it? No, it can't, because there's that 3D and depth perception that needs to happen when those scans happen. So biometrics are best because they're the easiest for you to do, because it's your face and your fingers, but they're the hardest for hackers to do because they can't do it remotely. They can do PIN numbers and passwords remotely, but they can't do biometric based logins when it comes to being that far away from you. They'd have to be in the room with you to be able to steal that. And that's simply why we say it's why a lot of like Apple and Google are moving towards a lot more protocols that protect us, that don't really require remembering a password or a PIN number, because there's a lot of security in the phone being on you in the first place. A lot of these hacks don't happen in your same room. They happen from people in far off places who just happen to guess very common passwords, and which most people do use by the common passwords. They'd be surprised how many people still use all those. We say on your phone to back up your files. Yet we usually say that, for something like a computer, my iMac, for instance, or my MacBook Pro, I would back that up all the time because I don't want to lose my files. But what about your mobile phone? Are you actually doing that? iCloud, Google Drive on Apple and on Android, they're very helpful with that because they allow you to be able to automate those backups. So it happens every day, every night, every time something major happens, that backup occurs. That makes it a really easy to remember thing because you're not actually having to remember it. So both of those phone types do have the opportunity to do that. Then there's also the opportunity to download your data into somewhere else. So you can back up your files, not just to iCloud or to Google Drive, but you can download and put them on a hard drive and then restore through your computer if you want an extra copy of that. Now, do backups take time? When you're doing them manually, absolutely they do. But when you've just got constant updates going on with iCloud or with Google Drive on your Android phone, then you're not even having to think about that. What happens though is some people, they go, oh, I want to save space on my phone for more photos, so I don't want to run backups. The backups don't store in your phone, they store in the cloud. So they store in the services of Google Drive or Apple's iCloud service, which then stores all that information so you can retrieve it later on. So The idea there is, why would you do this? Simply because you lose your phone, you can pick up another phone and just download all your details again, all your photos, all your videos, everything was on your phone, including all your passwords, all your details, all your contacts are all now going to be easily able for you to transfer over from the cloud into that new phone. And if you do find your old phone again, you can give back the old phone after wiping it out, and you've got a secure phone again. So backups, they should be automatically happening. If they're not, you really need to take some time to work that out on iPhone or Android, of how you can make sure that your phone is backing up to the cloud. The same thing happens with encrypting your files. Now, most of the most recent phones these days do encrypt your files. What does that mean? It means that if someone got into your phone, they can't do anything with that information. They can't back it up. They can't copy it. And if they do, it'll just come out as gobbledygook. And that's a great thing, because even if someone's got your phone physically, they cannot use the data in it unless they get in using your thumbnail, fingerprint, passphrase, whatever you're using. They're not able to get in and get those files, because they're just going to be useless for them without that correct, legitimate login. So iPhone, Android, iPad, they all encrypt your files in one way or another. I know that in the most recent versions of Android, I think it's the last 3 versions, I believe, that it does actually run it. iPhone has been doing it for a while as well. What it means is that now there's a very big difference here, and you need to look at this in terms of what's on your phone and what's in the cloud. On your phone, everything's encrypted. So we've had some quite famous active shooter situations where police have been trying to get into the shooter's iPhone, and Apple won't help them, because Apple can't help them. They can't actually access what's on the phone. Now, can they access what's been stored in the cloud? Absolutely, yes, they can. And that's where they help law enforcement quite often, is to give access to law enforcement to the information that's in the cloud account, not the information that's on the phone. Because once you kind of lock that down, there's no way of getting that information at all. So why do we do that? Well, because we want to make sure that, someone doesn't pick up our phone and just be able to get those files out. That's the most obvious way of doing it. We want to make sure that we've got the opportunity to be able to go, well, we're not going to easily have if you've got a team, your team is not going to easily have all those private client details stolen if you've got encrypted data on the phones. Now, each one of the most recent kinds of phones should automatically do that. You may need to check some older phones to make sure they do it as well. If they don't, they may just need a system update, a new version of Android, a new version of iOS, just to make sure that everything that should be working is actually working. A few quick tips here for your phone. Don't plug in random cords. If a cord shows up at your desk, don't plug it into your phone. And the reason here is because one of these social engineering ways that someone will use to get into, if you're in government or working in defense contract or something like that, your phone is now a target because you've got stuff on there or access to people and contacts that person may want. So when you plug in a random cord or put in something like a USB that you just found on the street, that's basically can be giving someone instant, straight away access to everything on your phone. And then potentially, if you've got an iPhone, everything on all your other devices that are Apple as well. It's pretty scary. This can be done not just from USB sticks, but random charging cords. You might think it's a cord. What can be possibly in it? There's technology now which can actually pass that through your internet connection and load up all the information from your computer to a third-party thing without you even knowing it's happening. Treat your phone like a wallet. I have a wallet and a phone. I mostly use my phone for payments, but recently when I went to Bali, I couldn't use the phone because not everywhere does tap and pay yet. Most people still do insert and use a PIN number. So I would treat my phone like it's a wallet that contains everything that my life is, my driver's license, everything. I consider that if I lost my wallet, there's cards that I have to replace. There's, my Flybuys card, my Woolworths Everyday Rewards card. Everything like that has to be then replaced. When credit cards need to be cancelled, it's a massive hassle with today's situation where we've got so many Subscriptions. So many subscriptions to so many services that we have to cancel and put a new card on. It's a horrible thing to do. We want it to be so that we never have to lose those cards and details in the first place. We never want to lose our wallet. So make sure you treat your phone like that as well. They're not plugging into airport USB ports. It can be really tempting to do that in Sydney and Melbourne Airport, who have a lot of those USB ports in their food courts. The problem is, though, there's not really much stopping a clever person from putting listening devices inside those power points where the where the USB plugs in. Now, it's not a problem with just power going into like a proper power cord. It's more to do with USB Type C cords, USB cords that are used to charge your phone. Those kind of things can actually have listening devices and software on them that as soon as you connect that, it can then get hold of, even take over your phone. So try not to plug your phone directly into an airport USB port. The power points are great with your charger. They're not a problem. USB ports, never plug anything into anyone else's USB ports unless you absolutely have to and you know it's a very secure place. Trust me, these are things that happen, and it's happened so many times. I went to a cybersecurity conference 3 years ago, actually just before the pandemic, and we'll talk through one of the absolutely scary social engineering dramas of someone who literally had a cord that was dropped off in the foyer of their office, and someone just said, "Oh, I think someone's dropped that," and someone picked it up and said, "Oh, yeah, I think I might have lost one earlier." That person plugged that in to charge their phone, and then the entire workplace was then having to change everything with their security because there was a very good chance that person got into that company's digital assets. If you've got a website, there's a whole lot of security considerations you need to have, but it really comes down to a few very basic ones. The first one being this HTTPS. Now, that's where you see like whether a site is secure or a site is not secure. If a site is secure, that means it's safe for you to put your details into a form, to put your credit card number into the payment form as well, because it's using a secure socket connection that uses a level of encryption that so far hasn't really been broken by a lot of people who can just snoop on your web traffic. Let's just say you're on a network sharing it with a lot of other people at a co-working space, or at an airport or in a cafe, and you don't have things running through an HTTPS. If someone was sitting in those places wanting to buy something from your website, there's a very good chance that traffic can be intercepted, and all the details of it, including credit card number, the CVV number, and the expiry date, could all be sniffed up and remembered, and they could then go and use those details. So having that HTTPS in front of your website address is absolutely vital these days. In fact, you won't be able to do things like advertising on Google or Facebook or Pinterest or Twitter or LinkedIn until you have that in place. They will consider you to be too much of a security risk, and they won't do. Now, the other thing is too, Google won't even list your website now unless you have HTTPS protocol in front of it. If it's a secure site, how do you do that? Most web hosts will do this. In the case of things like Wix, Squarespace, and other hosted internet software like that, they take care of that for you. So all you just do is just go to your website, make sure that the beginning of the address is HTTPS. Because that's telling you that it is a secure website to be working on. And why would you need to bother about it? Because you want to tell your customers you can be trusted with their details. It would be pretty horrible if someone put their credit card details in your site, and those credit card details are used to run a very illegal Facebook ad campaign that got you banned from your Facebook account, and also happened to get you in a position where your credit card was used to run up $3,500 worth of ads. Does that happen? Absolutely. I was very, very specific about that case because I've seen it happen to a friend. $3,500 of ad spend that they are then liable to pay. They can argue all they want, but they're still liable to pay it because it was done on their credit card using their account and their credentials to log in. The next one is about updating your files, particularly those of us who've got WordPress sites or something like Joomla or Drupal, any sort of website software where you had to buy web hosting and you had to install the software to run that particular website. So in that case, you got to update in WordPress's case, it's the core files of WordPress. So whatever version WordPress is on right now, I know that I've got a couple of sites that I need to this afternoon run the update script on, because at the moment, all my WordPress sites, and I host well over 600 of them now, have got the everything up to date. But I saw this morning where there's 3 sites that were flagged to me that didn't have one of those updates. So I need to run that manually. The themes that you're running, if it's an Elemental based theme, or it's Divi theme, or something like a Beaver Builder theme, or Avada themes, whatever the theme is that you're using for your WordPress site, it's going to require a software update as well. Because as WordPress updates, so too all the things that work on WordPress also have to update in order to be not only, fully functional and smooth running, but also secure. Because sometimes software isn't written in a particularly secure way, or hackers have found out a way around to get into systems by using vulnerabilities that exist in the code of the way that, say, the website software is written. So if you haven't updated your themes for a long time, that can give someone an unprecedented level of access to your WordPress website to completely wipe it out and put up their own message on there. I know this because it happened to me in 2008 when we had on Christmas Day, 32 websites were hacked by a Turkish revolutionary front group. Now, what was their point in hacking our email, our website? So it seemed to be just to get some kind of attention for their cause. It was definitely not to get money, but in most cases these days, it's all about ransomware. They want to get you into your systems, switch them off enough so you can tell that you can't have control of them again, and then they ask for a ransom of money to be able to turn it back over to you again. Which, of course, in the case of Medibank, how are we to know that they haven't kept the login details, kept their own little backdoor into the system so that you can get in there and a year later they hit you up and again you have to end up paying them a ransom? Thing goes for plugin files on WordPress as well, all the things that increase the functionality, everything from a Kismet through, which is a spam bot stopping piece of software, right through to like mail integrations. With I use Sendinblue as my mail sending system, so I've got integrations which are through plugins through WordPress to connect WordPress site with my email system. So you got to make sure all those things are adequately updated, because if they're not, those little vulnerabilities start to stack up. You might go from one vulnerability on one day, the next day there could be 12 new vulnerabilities because the updates haven't filtered through to your website yet. Ultimately, you should have those things all automatically turned on to update on their own, but where you can't, it's something which you should go into your website at least once a day just to check to see if there's any updates and then run them. There are a few exceptions to that, which I won't go into here because that's more to do with, unraveling people's WordPress website woes, where they've had an unscrupulous developer design something that they cannot work on themselves. Why would you do this? Well, because you want just not only for your customers to be safe on your website, but you also want yourself to be safe. People not hacking your website and putting things up on that website that shouldn't be there, that actually kills your reputation and makes you look like an unstable and uncareful person who's running that business. You've probably heard all about two-factor authentication and multi-factor authentication. Very important tools, not only for logging into your computer and your phone, but also for logging into your WordPress website or whatever website software you use. Even Squarespace and Wix, the hosted things, you should have a multi-factor authentication in there, because the fact is that a username and an email is very easy to guess in the big picture, whereas at second factor, where it goes to your phone and your phone alone, or maybe through to an authenticator app that's on your phone and your phone alone, that gives you a layer of protection. You go, well, I'm more protected than 99.97% of other websites in the world. That's pretty bloody good. I can probably work with that. Now, will people know that they're hacked at all? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know that's necessarily what it is. That multi-factor authentication will stop that from being a problem, because we don't want people getting into our websites and messing them up, because it just kills our reputation, and it can stop a lot of your business from moving forward, particularly if you've got an e-commerce website. Then we get on to the payment card industry data security standards, which is basically using a payment processor. If you've got an e-commerce website, or you're taking payments for bookings or your time or something like that, that's where you look at it and go, well, has my payment provider got enough protection so that I know that the credit cards aren't having their numbers swiped and they're not being sort of filtered off to other areas? So the big guys, Stripe, PayPal, Square, and eWay, all are PCI DSS compliant. That's great. That's it. That's easy use. This is probably takes nearly 90% of all the website shopping carts in the world are running through one of these four. PayPal is the biggest, Stripe is the next one, Square is the one after that, eWay is probably the one after that, and there's several others as well. I don't remember the names of them because they're very uncommonly used, but this one probably does close to 90% of all payment processing in the world, apart from bank point of sale systems, which are slightly different and don't really go with the same kind of level of protection, because you're not actually storing any information about the transaction like you are with these guys. These guys do the compliance for you, so you don't have to worry about doing the compliance for yourself. So it makes life a little bit easier for you when you know you're not really the guy who has to do it. Why do we do this? Simply because it's compliant and it's now law. You cannot connect through to things like Zero, MILB, and all those things from your website now unless you have this there. You have to use a payment provider that actually is compliant with these things. All the big ones are. Next, we take a little look at your computer, and this is one where we get a bit lost because people look at computers and go, scary big things. I don't know how to really work with those updates. If I do work with those updates, well, then I don't know how often I'm meant to do them. And there's all these questions we start to ask. Will I break my computer if I run that update? Because once upon a time, my friend Jenny did that, and she got caught out with messing up her entire website or messing up her entire piece of work because somebody ran an update that wasn't really ready. What I would do is turn on automatic updates for every single plugin, theme, every part of your website. If you are hosted on a web server and you have software running your website that isn't something that's self-hosted like Wix, Squarespace, Doodah, all those kind of guys, you need to have automatic updates on. Why? Because it just makes it so much easier. You don't have to remember to do those updates. And if an update goes wrong, it usually automatically will roll itself back and it'll say, hey, this update didn't work. What do you want to do? And you go, oh, I'll give it another try. Or you might go, you know what? I probably got the wrong version there. I'll go and have a talk to the software developer and see what they're able to do. The other thing is to always check that any software that you're installing on your computer comes from a reputable company. Really, it would seem like we shouldn't be that cynical that we only recognize software from really established players. But the fact is, so many hackers hide so many things in so many innocuous looking apps that it's just making us having to go, I just don't trust anybody anymore. And you have to remove that trust over here for a second and go, well, these guys, Adobe, I know them. I've worked with their stuff for 20 years. I think I'm okay to install that update. But knowing that the software is coming from a reputable company makes a big difference, because you are a business owner. You're not supposed to be a cybersecurity expert. So for you to try and work out what the things are that are malware, as opposed to being very easy use software, then how would you know? How would you know what's hidden in there? I would say there's a pretty good idea of doing, you just go in, if you don't recognize the name of the company behind the software, do not install the software until you've had adequate time to research and read about it, and even go to forums and chatting on Facebook to ask people, do you know who these guys are? Should I be trusting them? Are they good people to do business with? And then you'll have your answer. You'll probably download the app or the software and you'll be doing just fine. So that whole thing to do with software being from reputable companies is really to protect you from, very unscrupulous characters who are working for their mama's basements, I guess, creating things that are designed to put malware on your phone, on your laptop, especially laptops, because they're a lot more vulnerable than what phones are. Phones are a lot more protected because they were invented much later in the story. So we know why we're doing that. The next one is the software asking for excessive permissions? This is where I think on phones you see it so much, where it's like, I need permission to do this, I need permission to do this, I need permission to do this. TikTok is a special at it. It asks for everything on your phone. They are tracking you to the hilt. So what do you do about it? You say, I don't want any of those things. I just want to work on the app without it tracking me. And you can do that. There is an option to do that with every app on the App Store, where you do not have to have, um, you know, all those excessive permissions to be able to get so many people giving so much information to that software company that isn't necessary. Like I said with TikTok, they take a lot of information and we do not know what they're doing with that information. We think it might be just to make it a better service or to track their ads better. But what realistically it could be is just quite simply they just want more data to be able to sell onto other third parties or to just better track us across our activities across the internet. Now, why do we want to stop that? Well, basically because it's your data, your privacy, your location, you may not want those things trackable. Or secondly, you might want to do it simply because you have lots of customer details in your phone, in your laptop, in your desktop computer, that if someone was able to track too much of what's going in there, that you don't know what software vulnerabilities and interfaces might be between your customer relationship management system and your Facebook ad system. If there's a vulnerability in the bridge that connects them, then people can get in there and do all sorts of nasty things to it. So if it's asking for excessive permissions with lots of pop-ups saying, I need access to this, I need access to this, read what it's asking for and you go, there's no way that they need my photo or my date of birth in order to identify me because I'm identified by my username and password. Just reject the parts you don't want to have in there. You do get the choice to do it. If you don't get the choice, reject that software, move on and try something else. You can also set your device to require approval before anything new gets installed on it. This happens automatically with both Windows and with Macs now. It happens automatically with iOS and with Android, where you need to, if you're going to install anything that's outside of the App Store environment, what it will do, it'll ask for your explicit permission to do it. And you have to put in, you have to tap on a button on the screen that says, yes, I approve of this. So this is automatically default. If it's not default on yours, you've turned it off, please turn it back on again. I know it's annoying having things pop up all the time, but it will make such a difference to your level of security. Remember, in this session, we're looking to try and get ourselves to that magic number of 95% when it comes to the protection you have against cyber criminals and hackers. And you do this simply because you don't want people in your phone. You don't want people in tracking your every move. We don't want people necessarily getting hold of parts of your device that you don't want them having access to. And our question for four from the guys from RDA Tropical North, which was all about using LastPass as a password manager. We'll look very briefly at these. What they do essentially is allow you to have one password to rule them all that gets you into a system that contains all of your passwords. Now, all these systems then don't just have your everyday stock standard, admin123 as a password and username combination. They allow you to choose very complex and long passwords that are almost impossible to guess by anybody and any computer against all your individual logins. So say for instance, I might have my Westpac login, I'll have my Just Jeans website login, I'll have my wish.com.au login, my Amazon login, my Netflix login, my Disney Plus login. Now they're all going to have these excessively long passwords that I can never be expected to actually use. Way too many of them. So what I will do is then go, well, I need to hide those behind a wall where there's a great big long password that is the gateway to all of those. But not only that, have second factor authentication log into it. The LastPass that I use certainly has that ability to be able to say, here I've got a long password, but I can use it based upon it. Once I've guessed that password, then I also have I have to use my Google Authenticator app on my phone to get a code to then let me in to use that. And it makes me do that every 14 days. It forces me to log back in. Got a question about Google Chrome's password manager. It's not really a password manager in the sense that it doesn't give you the option to design very long passwords of your own. I know that recently, I know the Safari browser on a Mac was allowing you to do this. Chrome itself doesn't do that. You'd have to get a plugin like something like LastPass to be able to, or KeyPass, or one of the others like 1Password. They have a plugin to your browser, which immediately, when you go to a site, allows you to choose and you sign in for the first time, you choose a very long, very complicated password. So Google Chrome's password manager, I think, can be a little scary because unless you've got your computer locked that nobody can get into it easily, then most of us just walk away to lunch and leave our computers open. Someone can walk in there, get into your password vault, get all your passwords out because your computer hasn't locked. So making sure your computer locks after a certain amount of time will be very helpful to keep you very safe as well. There's a big difference between Brook 2012 as a password. Let me go back again. And be realistic on old kettles every day. Now, if you notice how the letters that I've highlighted there add up to the word Brook. So if you really need to use your daughter's name or your dog's name, Brooke, then you can do that, but do it in a creative way. So it's not just Brooke 2012, which is when Brooke may have been born, where we've actually got a passphrase designed around that. And this could be a really good way of doing it. Be realistic on old kettles every day. I could really easily remember that rather than Brooke 2012 anyway. And that's one of the most common passwords in Australia for people who have daughters. They name the daughters Brooke. And Brooke is a very popular name amongst millennials. So you look at that and go, how can I make it more hard for people to get into? Will be realistic on old kettles every day. And therefore you've got a much harder password or passphrase to be able to type in. Here's a few of the examples. LastPass, KeePass, 1Password are all very good at this. All of them have a free level as well. So you don't have to pay for the basic level of it. I pay a yearly fee simply because I want to be able to have all the features on my mobile as well as my desktop and be able to have these go to my team so the people who are working for me also use LastPass. And if what I find is that they have created passwords to get into things like an Instagram account that we created last year for a particular project, I have the login details when that person leaves. I just copy across their vault of passwords into my vault of passwords, and I've now got access to all the things I need to have. But again, that's only done by the owner of the company or someone who's in a position of authority who can do those sort of things within your business.